We've all heard stories about justice, about courts and laws designed to protect the innocent. But there's a dark chapter in American history where the roles were flipped, where the courtroom was a weapon, the law was a trap, and the target was a child. This is the story of a girl who was 12 years old and pregnant by a man in her own house. But the state didn't punish him. They punished her. They called her stupid. They called her a menace. They used her pregnancy as an excuse to destroy her future and the future of tens of thousands of others, and they got the highest court in America to sign off on it. This isn't a story about a family secret. It's about a secret America kept for 50 years. A secret built on a lie, a girl, and a baby. The girl's name was Carrie Buck. The place was Charlottesville, Virginia. The time was the 1920s, an era of jazz, flappers, and a dangerous new idea called eugenics. The belief that society could be perfected by getting rid of unfit people. Carrie's story became the battlefield. Her life was turned into a legal test case, a case that would go all the way to the Supreme Court to decide if the government had the power to stop people like her from ever having children again. Her pregnancy was the evidence. Her body was the crime scene. If you value documented history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Paul Lombardo's definitive book, 3 Generations, No Imbeciles, and the official court records of the United States Supreme Court. Now, back to the story. Carrie Buck was born in July of 1906. Her early life was chaos. Her mother, Emma Buck, was poor, unmarried, and struggling. In 1920, when Carrie was a teenager, Emma was committed to a place with a long, terrifying name, the Virginia State Colony for Epileptics and Feeble-Minded. With her mother locked away, Carrie was placed in a foster home. She went to live with Irving and Alice Dobbs. By all accounts, she was a decent student. She did her chores. She tried to fit in. But in 1923, the life she was trying to build fell apart. She was pregnant. The Dobbs family panicked. A pregnant, unmarried foster daughter was a scandal they couldn't afford. So they crafted a story. It wasn't their fault. It was Carrie's. They said she was promiscuous. They said she had epileptic fits. They said she was feeble-minded, just like her mother. The pregnancy was their proof. They needed her gone. What they didn't tell anyone was the truth. Carrie hadn't been promiscuous. She had been raped. The father was a relative of her foster mother, a man named Clarence Garland. But the truth didn't matter. The lie was more useful. On January 23, 1924, her foster father, Irving Dobbs, signed the commitment papers. Doctors, taking the family's word, declared her a moral imbecile. Her baby, a girl named Vivian, was born on March 28, 1924. Just 2 weeks later, Carrie was taken from her newborn child and shipped to the same institution that held her mother, the Virginia Colony. The superintendent there, a man named Dr. Albert Sidney Pretty, had been waiting for a girl just like Carrie. He had a brand new law, and he needed a victim to test it. In March of 1924, the same month Vivian was born, the state of Virginia passed the Eugenical Sterilization Act. It gave the state the power to operate on people in institutions, to cut them open and make sure they could never have children. The targets were the so-called insane, idiotic, imbecilic, and epileptic. Pretty believed these traits were passed down through families, polluting the American bloodline. But before he could start the operations on a mass scale, he needed the courts to say it was legal. He chose Carrie Buck to kill her, be his legal guinea pig. The system was rigged from the start. Pretty and the colony board filed a petition to sterilize Carrie. To make it look fair, the state appointed a lawyer for her. His name was Irving Whitehead. His job was to defend her. But Whitehead was a friend of the eugenics movement. His goal wasn't to win, it was to lose, convincingly. Before the case could go to trial, Dr. Pretty died. He was replaced by his colleague, Dr. John Hendren Bell. The case was renamed. It was now Buck versus Bell. The trial took place in the Amherst County Circuit Court in October of 1924. It was a circus. The state brought in witnesses who barely knew Carrie. A former teacher said she had peculiarities. Others testified that she had a vacant look in her eyes. They presented the pregnancy as irrefutable proof of her flawed character. They needed to prove that the feeble-mindedness ran in the family. They already had Carrie's mother, Emma, locked up. Now, they went after the baby. A nurse was sent to examine Vivian Buck. The baby was only 8 months old. The nurse, Caroline Wilhelm spent less than an hour with her. In her report, she declared the baby looked not quite normal. That was it. That was the evidence. A teacher's vague memory, a nurse's quick glance at an infant. With that, they had their perfect story. Emma, Carrie, and baby Vivian. 3 generations of imbeciles, a genetic threat that had to be stopped. If you value documented history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Adam Cohen's Imbeciles and the Historical Archives of the University of Virginia. Now, back to the story. The local court, of course, ruled in favor of the state. Carrie Buck would be sterilized. Her lawyer, Irving Whitehead, appealed the decision, just as planned. The case moved up the ladder to the Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals. In November of 1925, that court also sided with the state. The legal machine was working perfectly. There was only one place left to go. The Supreme Court of the United States. They didn't just want to sterilize Carrie. They wanted a ruling that would allow every state in the country to do the same. In 1927, the case of Buck versus Bell was argued in Washington, D.C. The man who wrote Virginia's sterilization law, Aubrey E. Strode, argued for the state. He painted a grim picture of a nation drowning under the weight of its defective citizens. Carrie's lawyer, Irving Whitehead, submitted a flimsy 10-page brief. He never met Carrie. He never spoke to her. He called no witnesses to defend her intelligence or her character. He presented the court with a textbook filled with eugenic propaganda as part of his argument. He was throwing the fight. The decision came down on May 2nd, 1927. The court voted 8-1 to strip Carrie Buck of her right to have another child. The single dissenting vote came from Justice Pierce Butler, who gave no reason. The majority opinion was written by one of the most celebrated figures in American law, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr. He was a Civil War veteran, a Harvard professor, a man seen as a champion of liberty. But his words in this case were cold steel. He dismissed any argument about Carrie's rights. He wrote that the public welfare was more important than the individual. Then, he delivered the most infamous line in the history of the court. A line that would be used to justify 60,000 forced sterilizations in America and would later be quoted by Nazi doctors at their war crimes trials. Holmes wrote, "It is better for all the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime, or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind," he concluded, with a chilling 3-word flourish that sealed the lie into law. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. The order was sent back to Virginia. On October 19, 1927, Carrie Buck was taken to the operating room at the Virginia colony. She was 21 years old. Dr. John Bell, the man whose name was on the lawsuit, performed the procedure himself. He cut her fallopian tubes, ensuring she could never get pregnant again. In his notes, he wrote that he was sterilizing her not for any medical reason, but for the good of the patient and of society. A few months later, the state declared her cured of her social ills and released her. Carrie Buck went on to live a quiet, ordinary life. She was paroled in 1929. She got married to a man named William Eagle. When he died, she married again. She worked cleaning houses. She cared for the elderly. She loved to read books and magazines. Everyone who actually knew her, who wasn't paid to lie about her, described her as perfectly normal, kind, a little shy. She was not an imbecile. She was just a woman who had been used, lied about, and broken by her own country. She outlived the doctors who committed her, the lawyers who betrayed her, and every single Supreme Court justice who voted against her. And what about Vivian, the 3rd imbecile? The baby whose supposed abnormality was the final piece of evidence? Vivian was raised by the Dobbs family, the same people who had sent her mother away. Far from being feeble-minded, she was a bright child. She was listed on her school's honor roll in the 2nd grade, but she was never healthy. In 1932, at the age of just 8 years old, Vivian died from a stomach infection. Her short life, used as a weapon against her own mother, was over. The lie had served its purpose. The Supreme Court's decision in Buck versus Bell has never been officially overturned. It stands as a stain on American justice, a terrifying reminder of how easily the law can be twisted into a tool of oppression. Virginia formally apologized for its eugenics program in 2002. But for decades, the official story remained the same. Carrie Buck was a promiscuous, unintelligent woman from a flawed family, and the state had done the right thing. The truth remained buried in dusty court files and sealed medical records. Then, in the late 1970s, a young law professor named Paul Lombardo began to investigate the case. He didn't believe the official story. He started digging. He found court documents nobody had looked at in 50 years. He tracked down Carrie Buck, then an old woman in her 70s, living in a nursing home not far from where she was sterilized. He was the first person in her entire life who asked for her side of the story. Lombardo uncovered it all. He found Vivian's second-grade report card with its honor roll grades. He found letters from Carrie's teachers before her pregnancy, describing her as an average, capable student. He uncovered the evidence of the rape by her foster mother's nephew, proving the pregnancy was not the result of promiscuity, but of a violent crime. He proved that the state, her lawyer, and the highest court in the land had all relied on fabricated evidence and outright lies. The entire case was a fraud. But here is the final, cold truth. After he had gathered all the evidence, Lombardo sat with Carrie Buck and read her the words of Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr., the words that had defined her life without her ever knowing they had been written. He read the sentence, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough." She sat in silence for a long time. She knew her mother, Emma, wasn't an imbecile. She knew she wasn't. And she knew her daughter, Vivian, the little girl on the honor roll, was not an imbecile. Finally, she looked up at him, her voice quiet but clear, and gave the verdict the courts never did. "They done me wrong," she said. "They done me wrong. A courthouse lie, a Supreme Court signature, a life spent in the shadow of a word, and a truth that took 50 years to claw its way into the light."